The sleek-black Ducati Monster gleamed in the late afternoon sun as Michael Foster pulled into the driveway of his new home. After 15 years of apartment living, he had finally saved enough for a down payment on a modest three-bedroom house in Oak Ridge Estates. The motorcycle, his pride and joy, represented years of overtime shifts at the hospital where he worked as an ER nurse. Michael cut the engine and took a moment to admire the brick facade of his new home, savoring the satisfaction of ownership. He hadn't been there 10 minutes when a sharp rap on his shoulder interrupted his reverie. "Excuse me, that motorcycle cannot be parked in the driveway." Michael turned to find a thin woman with platinum blonde hair cut in a severe bob staring at him with undisguised contempt. Her lips were pressed into a tight line, and she clutched a leather portfolio to her chest like a shield. "I'm sorry," Michael said, confused. "I'm Patricia Williamson, president of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association." She extended a business card held between two manicured fingers. "And you are in violation of community standards, Section 4, Paragraph 7. No recreational vehicles may be stored in driveways or front yards. That includes motorcycles." Michael accepted the card reflexively. "But I just moved in. I haven't even unloaded my moving truck yet." Patricia's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Rules are rules, Mr. Foster." Michael Foster. "Well, Mr. Foster, I suggest you familiarize yourself with our HOA bylaws immediately. I brought you a welcome packet that includes all our regulations and your first month's dues invoice." She thrust the portfolio into his hands. "The fee is $350 per month, due on the 1st. Michael's eyebrows shot up. $350? My realtor mentioned HOA fees, but she said they were around $150. Patricia's smile tightened. "The board voted for an increase last month. We have plans for a community gazebo and koi pond. Very exclusive. It's all detailed in the newsletter." "Look, Ms. Williamson." "Mrs.," she corrected. "Mrs. Williamson, I just closed on this house yesterday. I need some time to get settled before I worry about community gazebos or moving my bike." Something dangerous flashed in Patricia's eyes. "Our community maintains certain standards, Mr. Foster. Everyone follows the rules. No exceptions. I'll move the bike to the garage once I've unpacked some things," Michael promised, trying to diffuse the tension. "As for joining the HOA, I'll need to review the documents first." Patricia's smile vanished entirely. "Joining isn't optional. When you purchased this property, you agreed to abide by the covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Everyone in Oak Ridge Estates is a member." Michael frowned. "My realtor mentioned it was voluntary." "Your realtor was mistaken," Patricia snapped. "I'll expect your first payment by the end of the week. And that motorcycle needs to be out of sight by sundown." She turned on her heel and marched toward a white Mercedes SUV parked at the curb. Michael watched her go, a sense of unease settling in his stomach. He flipped through the portfolio, scanning the pages of densely worded regulations. Something didn't add up. He pulled out his phone and did a quick search on HOA laws in his state. What he discovered made him frown deeper. According to state law, HOA membership could only be mandatory if it was clearly disclosed in the property deed or sales contract. Michael distinctly remembered signing a document stating that the HOA was voluntary. It was one of the reasons he'd chosen this neighborhood over others. As he scrolled through his phone, he found messages from two neighbors who had introduced themselves during his home inspection. He texted them both, asking about the HOA situation. Within minutes, he received nearly identical responses. "Be careful with Patricia. She's been terrorizing the neighborhood for years. Most of us don't actually pay those fees. She's not legally authorized to collect them." Michael stared at the messages, then back at Patricia's Mercedes now disappearing around the corner. His instincts as an ER nurse, honed by years of dealing with difficult patients and situations, told him this was only the beginning of his troubles with Patricia Williamson. He had no idea just how right he was. Over the next 2 weeks, Michael settled into his new home and his neighborhood routine. He moved his Ducati to the garage as promised, not because Patricia had demanded it, but because it made sense to protect his investment. His work schedule at the hospital kept him busy, but he managed to meet several neighbors during his morning runs or evening walks. What he learned troubled him. Patricia Williamson had been running what amounted to a neighborhood extortion scheme for nearly 3 years. The legitimate HOA had dissolved 5 years ago when the original developer transferred control to the homeowners. Without enough interest from residents to form a new board, the HOA had legally ceased to exist. Patricia, who had been the secretary of the original association, simply never stopped collecting dues or enforcing her increasingly arbitrary rules. She started with small things, explained Ron Garcia, a retired teacher who lived 2 doors down. They were sharing beers on Ron's back patio on a Friday evening. First, it was just sending reminder letters about lawn care or trash cans. Then came the fake citations and fines. Most newcomers just pay up without question. "Why hasn't anyone reported her?" Michael asked. Ron sipped his beer thoughtfully. A few have tried. But Patricia's husband is a city councilman and her brother-in-law works for the police department. Complaints tend to disappear. He leaned closer. Between us, she's collected over $200,000 in the last 3 years. That Mercedes she drives, paid for, with HOA money. Michael shook his head in disbelief. That's straight-up fraud. Yep. But proving has been difficult. She keeps just enough legitimate activities going, like organizing the annual block party or maintaining the entrance landscaping, to make it seem official. The conversation stayed with Michael long after he returned home. That night, he dug through his closing documents and found exactly what he remembered. A clear statement that the Oak Ridge Estates HOA was voluntary, with no mandatory fees or architectural review requirements. Armed with this information, Michael drafted a polite but firm letter to Patricia, declining membership in her HOA and requesting she discontinue all communication regarding community standards enforcement. He included copies of the relevant documentation from his closing package and quoted the applicable state laws. He dropped the letter in Patricia's mailbox on Sunday morning before heading to his 12-hour shift at the hospital. When he returned home that evening, exhausted after treating multiple victims of a highway pileup, he found his front yard covered in bright orange violation notices staked into his lawn. Unapproved landscaping, improper window treatments, unauthorized exterior paint color, excessive noise plant. The last one was particularly absurd since he'd been at work for the past 12 hours. Michael pulled each stake from his lawn, growing angrier with each one. As he yanked out the final notice, headlights swept across his driveway. Patricia's white Mercedes pulled up to the curb. She stepped out, cell phone in hand, apparently recording him. Removing official citations is a violation of HOA policy, Mr. Foster. That's another $250 fine. Michael took a deep breath, reminding himself to stay calm. Mrs. Williamson, I sent you documentation proving that the HOA is voluntary according to my deed restrictions. These citations have no legal standing. I've been running this association for 15 years, Patricia snapped, though Michael knew from his conversations with neighbors that this was a lie. If you think you can come in here and disrupt our community standards, you're sorely mistaken. I'm not trying to disrupt anything. I simply decline to participate in a voluntary organization. 3 days after his confrontation with Patricia, Michael received a certified letter from Williamson Legal Associates demanding payment of all HOA dues and threatening legal action. A quick online search revealed no law firm by that name, just another of Patricia's intimidation tactics. What truly concerned Michael, however, was the neighborhood meeting he'd organized for Saturday afternoon. 15 homeowners had agreed to gather in his house to discuss Patricia's fraudulent HOA and plan a collective response. The group included both longtime residents who had been paying out of fear and newer homeowners who had been misled about the mandatory nature of the fees. Friday night, Michael returned from his hospital shift to find a formal notice taped to his front door. Notice of emergency HOA board in Yitiang. Saturday, 2:00 p.m. at the Williamson residence. Agenda: removal of problem residents. Attendance mandatory. Fines for non-compliance. The timing was no coincidence. Patricia had somehow learned about his meeting schedule for the same time. Michael took a photo of the notice and texted it to the group, suggesting they move their gathering to Sunday instead. Everyone agreed, though several expressed concern about the ominous removal of problem residents agenda item. That night, Michael slept fitfully. At 3:17 a.m., his phone buzzed with a security alert. He grabbed it, instantly awake, and saw a figure in dark clothing approaching his garage. The camera's night vision showed a familiar silhouette. Patricia's distinctive bob haircut was visible despite her hoodie. Michael jumped out of bed and hit the panic button on his security system as he watched Patricia pour something from a gas can around the base of his garage door. When she struck a match, Michael was already dialing 911. Fire department, there's someone setting fire to my garage. He shouted into the phone, giving his address as he ran downstairs and grabbed the fire extinguisher from his kitchen. On the security feed, flames leaped up the garage door. Patricia stepped back, watching with a satisfied expression that turned to shock when alarms began blaring from Michael's house. She dropped the gas can and ran toward her car parked down the street. Michael burst through his front door, extinguisher in hand, and raced to the garage. The fire had already spread across the door and was licking at the eaves. He emptied the extinguisher on the base of the flames, but it wasn't enough. Thick smoke billowed as the fire found new fuel. His motorcycle, his Ducati, was inside. Neighbors emerged from their homes, alerted by the commotion. Someone ran up with another extinguisher. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing louder by the second. My bike said mare, Michael shouted, coughing through the smoke. Garage door opener, asked Ron Garcia, who had arrived with a garden hose. Michael shook his head. Inside the garage on the wall, The heat was intense now, the paint on the door bubbling and peeling. The fire department arrived moments later and professional firefighters took over, ordering everyone back to a safe distance. It took 20 minutes to extinguish the blaze completely. The garage door had burned through and smoke damage extended throughout the structure, but the firefighters had managed to save the house itself. Michael's Ducati, however, was a melted, charred ruin, the pride of his life reduced to twisted metal and ash. As the fire chief inspected the scene, he kicked something at the edge of the driveway. "Is this yours?" he asked, holding up a partially melted gas can. "No," Michael said. "It belongs to the woman who started the fire. I have it all on video." Within an hour, 2 police officers arrived, followed by a detective. Michael showed them the security footage, clear as day, Patricia Williamson committing arson. "We'll need to take a statement," the detective said, "and we'll need that video." Michael nodded, still in shock. "She did this because I refused to pay into her fake HOA. She's been running a scam for years, collecting money from everyone in the neighborhood." The detective raised an eyebrow. "Fraud and arson? That's a serious combination." As dawn broke, Michael sat on his front steps, watching the investigation unfold. Crime scene technicians photographed the damage, collected evidence, and took samples from the gas can. Neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, murmuring among themselves. A patrol car pulled up and 2 officers escorted Patricia Williamson from her home in handcuffs. She spotted Michael and lunged toward him, her face contorted with rage. "This is your fault," she screamed as the officers restrained her. "You couldn't just follow the rules like everyone else." "The rules weren't real, Patricia," Michael called back, anger finally breaking through his shock. "And neither was your HOA." Michael awoke to insistent knocking at 6:30 a.m. the day after the fire. Through the peephole, he saw a middle-aged man in an expensive suit holding a leather briefcase. "Mr. Foster, I'm Lawrence Keller, district attorney for the county." The man offered his business card when Michael opened the door. "I apologize for the early hour, but I wanted to speak with you privately before my office makes a decision on Mrs. Williamson's case." Michael invited him in, instantly wary. The district attorney himself making a house call at dawn seemed unusual, especially given the straightforward nature of the case. Keller settled onto Michael's couch, placing his briefcase on the coffee table. "I've reviewed the preliminary evidence. The security footage is quite compelling." "It's pretty clear-cut," Michael agreed. "She poured gasoline around my garage and lit it on fire. 16 neighbors witnessed it, and her fingerprints are on the gas can." "Yes, well," Keller adjusted his tie. "Cases like these are rarely as simple as they appear. Mrs. Williamson has been a pillar of this community for many years. Her husband has served on the city council for 3 terms. There are considerations." Michael felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. "What kind of considerations?" "Councilman Williamson and I go back decades. We were fraternity brothers. He's endorsed every one of my campaigns." Keller leaned forward. "He called me personally last night. Patricia was released on bail within hours, by the way." "She committed arson and almost burned down my house while I was sleeping," Michael said, his voice tight. "Not to mention the fraudulent HOA scheme she's been running for years." Keller waved his hand dismissively. "The HOA matter is civil, not criminal. As for the fire, well, Mrs. Williamson has already offered a statement through her attorney. She claims she was conducting a legitimate inspection of code violations on your property when she noticed a gas leak from your motorcycle. Being the responsible citizen she is, she attempted to contain it, but accidentally ignited the fumes. She was running to call the fire department when your alarm went off." Michael stared in disbelief. "That's absurd. The security video clearly shows her pouring gasoline and deliberately setting the fire." "Videos can be interpreted different ways, especially at night," Keller said smoothly. "And juries can be unpredictable. A prominent citizen with no prior record versus a newcomer to the neighborhood. It's not the slam dunk you might think." The implication was clear. The DA was preparing to drop or reduce the charges. "What do you want from me?" Michael asked bluntly. Keller smiled, opening his briefcase. "I brought a settlement agreement. Mrs. Williamson is prepared to pay for all damages to your property, including full replacement value for your motorcycle. In return, you'll withdraw your criminal complaint and sign an NDA regarding the entire incident. And if I refuse, then I'll be forced to take a very close look at the evidence. The charges might need to be adjusted based on intent, which is difficult to prove. Perhaps it was just reckless behavior rather than deliberate arson. Or maybe there isn't enough to proceed at all." Keller slid the document across the table. "This way, you get made whole financially without a lengthy court process." Michael didn't touch the papers. "I need to think about it." "Of course. Take the morning. I'll need your answer by noon." Keller stood, straightening his suit. "One more thing. Councilman Williamson mentioned your position at County General. He serves on the hospital board's funding committee, I believe." The morning after Patricia's rearrest, Oak Ridge Estates awoke to news crews and satellite vans lining the streets. What had begun as a local dispute had exploded into a statewide scandal encompassing fraud, arson, corruption, and abuse of power. Michael found himself thrust into an unexpected spotlight as journalists clamored for interviews about the HOA vigilant who exposed the scheme. "I'm not a vigilant," he told a reporter from the state's largest newspaper. "I'm just someone who refused to be bullied and happened to have security cameras." But the media frenzy was just beginning. By noon, the story had gone national, with cable news networks picking up on the fake HOA queen angle. Pictures of Patricia's white Mercedes, her designer wardrobe, and her luxury vacations, all allegedly funded by fraudulent HOA fees, flashed across screens nationwide. Social media exploded with people sharing their own HOA horror stories, and hashtag HOA Karen began trending. Overnight, Michael's stand against Patricia had transformed into a symbol of resistance against neighborhood tyrants everywhere. 3 days after Patricia's arrest, Michael received a call from a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Foster, this is Jeremy Williamson." "Councilman Williamson," Michael asked wearily. "Not anymore," the man said, his voice hollow. "I resigned this morning." "That's not why I'm calling. I need to apologize." Michael was stunned into silence. "I had no idea what Patricia was doing," Jeremy continued. "With the HOA, I knew she was passionate about the neighborhood, but I never looked at the books. Never questioned where the money for her car or our vacations came from." He paused. "I believed her when she said you were harassing her. I believed her about the fire being an accident. I've been believing her lies for years. Why are you telling me this?" "Because the investigators found something in our home office. A journal. Patricia kept detailed records of everything. The fake HOA, the intimidation tactics, even lists of which officials she could manipulate through my connections." Jeremy's voice cracked. "There's an entry from the night before the fire. She wrote, 'I have a plan to burn your garage as a lesson to the troublemaker.' It was premeditated." Michael gripped his phone tighter. "Did you turn this over to the authorities?" "Yes. My lawyer advised against it, but I couldn't." Jeremy took a shuddering breath. "My whole career was built on public trust, and I failed completely. The least I can do is help make this right." The journal proved to be the linchpin in the state's case. With physical evidence of premeditation, Patricia's tearful accident story collapsed completely. The district attorney, Lawrence Keller, finding himself under investigation for attempted obstruction of justice, quickly recused himself. The state attorney general's office took over prosecution of all related cases. 2 weeks later, as the investigation expanded, Michael received another unexpected call, this time from his insurance company. "Mr. Foster, I'm calling with good news. We've completed our investigation of your claim, and we're prepared to offer full replacement value for your motorcycle plus additional compensation for emotional distress." "That's surprisingly straightforward," Michael said, having expected a fight given the unusual circumstances. "Well," the adjuster said, lowering her voice, "the company is eager to resolve this before it becomes part of the media circus. Also, we're filing our own civil suit against Mrs. Williamson for insurance fraud. She tried to file a claim on her homeowner's policy for legal expenses related to neighborhood safety activities." Michael couldn't help but laugh at the audacity. "She really doesn't know when to stop, does she?" The laughter died in his throat the next morning when he awoke to urgent banging on his door and shouts from outside. He opened it to find chaos, police cars with flashing lights, neighbors in pajamas pointing toward the center of the neighborhood, and the unmistakable smell of smoke in the air.